Now we're gonna talk. So we discussed some trends, some innovations that are coming, things that are coming, and I guess that one of the biggest trends that we have been seeing is airdrops. Right? It has been happening for a while. Communities have been growing and being made by these airdrops. And there's one case that is very interesting. That is the Bera Chain case. They started literally as a meme, an NFT, and from the bottom up, they created a full chain with a new protocol, the Proof of Liquidity. So I would like to invite here Cami to talk about Bera Chain and its Proof of Liquidity innovation. Salva de palmas, galera.
Okay, hola, buenas tardes. Good afternoon. So I'm Colombian. My Portuguese is very, very bad, but I'm gonna do a small part in Portuguese. One, because I wanna practice, and two, because of an ethos that I have of, if you're going to someone else's country, I live in Colombia, there's always a lot of gringos that come and they're like, oh, everyone should speak English. Why don't you guys speak English? And it's kind of just a pet peeve that I have. So I've also been trying to learn Portuguese for like 2 years. So now that I'm here, I'm going to give you guys a small piece in Portuguese, and then the talk is going to be in English. But I do need my phone. Okay. Ok, hoje minha apresentação vai ser em inglês, mas eu queria fazer uma pequena parte em português para vocês. Meu nome é Camila, eu lidero Developer Evangelism em Bera Chain. Talvez alguns de vocês se lembram de mim quando eu trabalhava na FIO. Como colombiana, sou apaixonada de trazer a América Latina para o centro das conversações sobre cripto. Aonde quer que eu trabalhe, eu pressiono internamente para que patrocinemos conferências LATAM e tenhamos foco nos developers de LATAM. Por isso, estou muito feliz que Bera Chain está sponsoring este evento. Uma maneira que você me pode ajudar a obter mais apoio de meus líderes Bera Chain e, em geral, é mostrar que existe ecossistema próspero e pessoas interessadas em Bera Chain. Então, eu tenho pequeno pedido. Se você estiver interessado, tem dúvidas ou tem algum comentário, tira uma foto da apresentação, suba a Twitter e tag Bera Chain e a mim. Assim me vai ajudar a mostrar a meus líderes. Mira, há muitas pessoas interessadas em Bera Chain, tem perguntas, tem que invertir mais recursos, tempo y plata en el ecosistema acá. ¿Sí me entendieron? Did you guys understand me? Ah! Okay, de 5, ¿cuánto? ¿Cuántas estrellas de 5? 10? No, she doesn't even speak Portuguese, liar. Okay, bueno, voy a poner esto acá. Okay. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about proof of liquidity, which I'll get into in this talk, but kind of the basis of it, there's two parts. So there's a part that's kind of a more technical overview of the consensus mechanism of the protocol itself, and we're going to touch on that. But the part that I'm going to focus more on is about how you can use proof of liquidity both as a user and as a developer to grow an ecosystem. And the intro that was given was great. Bera Chain started literally as an NFT project. It kind of grew into this like internet culture, internet meme, and they've used these kinds of incentives to reward their early community, which is now, I think, what we see is the result of like all of that time. And the community that's really strong is a result of these kinds of like incentives. And now it's been kind of cemented at the protocol level. So that's what we're going to talk about. Okay, my name is Camila Ramos. I lead developer evangelism at Bera Chain, and my whole job is to basically bring new awareness about Bera Chain, find interesting teams, find interesting developers, and get them to understand kind of what the value proposition of Bera Chain is, both for builders and for protocols. So Bera Chain is the first layer 1 using proof of liquidity consensus. And we'll get into what that means in a second, but this quote I really like a lot, and I actually found this quote just on Twitter, searching the word liquidity, because I wanted to kind of help people understand what it really means, because I don't come from a very DeFi heavy background. I come from a pretty like vanilla engineering kind of crypto background. So when I started working at Bera Chain, I had to kind of do all of the work to catch up on the DeFi side. So when I was thinking, like, how do you explain liquidity to someone in a way that's more than like, oh, it's for you to make swaps, for you to make trades. This quote really stood out to me, because when we think of liquidity, right, we think of like coins in a pool that let you do swaps, that let you do trades. But if you like kind of think a level deeper, liquidity has to come from somewhere, and it comes from people. So liquidity is actually a really interesting measure of how active a community is, and it's kind of a signal for like how interested people are in the ecosystem that you're building in. If you have a chain and ecosystem that has very low liquidity, very low TVL, it's not always a one-to-one direct correlation, right? But it's kind of a signal that it's not that poppin'. Whereas if you look at a chain or an ecosystem that has high TVL, that their DEX has a lot of liquidity, it's usually a signal that there's a lot of interest, a lot of ecosystem builders, et cetera. So I know you guys have all seen kind of the new points meta. And what I like to say is that proof of liquidity is points, but better. So everyone knows what I'm talking about when I say points? Yes? Okay. So I found these tweets, and I'll just let you guys read them while I speak a little bit. But basically, the points meta is you as a user, you bridge over your TVL, you use their DEX, you do whatever you think is going to get you points, right? Sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's not. Sometimes they have like very specific quests, and sometimes they're just like, oh, you get points for using the ecosystem. And the idea behind this is that eventually maybe you'll be rewarded. You'll get points, and maybe these will translate into an airdrop. Maybe this will translate into some sort of like retro PGF. Maybe it'll happen in 1 month. Maybe it'll happen in 6 months. Maybe it'll happen in a year. But the point is that you don't know. And when we talk about points, I know, in recent times there's been a few airdrops. There's one airdrop specifically that happened recently that a lot of people kind of voiced their opinion about it, and they said, hey, we bridged over all of this ETH. We gave you guys crypto economic security. You're able to show your investors, whoever, that you're getting a lot of traction, that you're getting a lot of users, that you're getting a lot of use. And in the end, we're not being kind of sufficiently paid and given the incentive for the liquidity that we provided. And when you think about points, I think some people think like, oh, those are just airdrop farmers that are entitled. They shouldn't get anything. But I don't really agree with that, because when you're bringing your liquidity, your ETH, that's what makes the ecosystem valuable, right? We just talked, if you look at some random chain with very low TVL, it's not a valuable chain. Their valuation is reflective of that. It's a chain with $500 million, valuation, which is totally different than Dimension and these other chains that are launching at 10 billion. And it has everything to do with the liquidity. So we're the ones that bring the liquidity. And with the points meta, it's like, maybe you'll get rewarded, maybe you won't. Maybe it'll happen in 6 months, maybe it'll happen in a year. Maybe it'll be locked for 6 months, There's a lot of different things that is purely speculative, and you have no idea what's coming. So proof of liquidity is points, but mechanized into a very transparent way. So first, let's talk about liquidity. The goal of any ecosystem at any given time, regardless of what they say on the website, they want to onboard 1 billion developers, or they want to offer crypto economic security in a new way, their bottom line is attracting as much liquidity as they can. Not just because for vanity, but because they need it for something. And usually the two things that you need it for are either crypto economic security, they rent your liquidity out to, to other protocols or to other teams or whatever it is, right, that their infrastructure, but they rent out your liquidity. That's what they need it for. Or they use it for actual liquidity in their DEX, liquidity in their perps, liquidity in their lending protocol, whatever. So any ecosystem needs liquidity, mostly for these two things. I think there's other things out there too, but this makes up the vast majority of things. So again, you as a user, you lock up your capital for X amount of time in the hopes of some reward. The protocol is able to boast good numbers, show traction, and attracts users, developers' attention with this. And now again, this isn't like some free airdrop, right? Okay, there are airdrop farmers, right? People who are in the Discord and they type GM every morning and they're just actually airdrop farming. But I'm talking about people who are bringing their liquidity. I think of those as two separate people. There's something called, right, opportunity cost. Opportunity cost describes the cost of you not doing something or the cost of you doing something. So if I let you borrow $10, and with those $10, I could have bought, 10 chickens that each were going to have 10 babies, and I could sell each chicken for $5, the opportunity cost of me giving you my $10 is whatever money I missed out on the chickens. You know what I mean? So there's an opportunity cost associated with you locking up your capital. So it's not that you're like, oh, these entitled airdrop farmers. No, there's a financial formula to this, right? You're locking up your capital. There's some like risk here, and there's some way that you have to think about what makes sense in your risk portfolio and what you're expecting, et cetera. So this is kind of the picture that I'm trying to paint here. So now, there's kind of a meme that, okay, when I say meme, I mostly mean like in my head, but I'm going to make it a meme on Twitter at some point about upside down blockchain. So other blockchains focus on rewarding validators first through block rewards, right? So if the way that blockchains work, if you're a validator, this is mostly how they work. I think there's differences in some blockchains, but the vast majority, you're a validator, you somehow earn the right to be a validator. On Ethereum, you stake 32 ETH. On proof of work, you perform some work to validate a block, or to build a block, and you validate all blocks. By building a new block and by validating other blocks that other people build, you receive a reward. These are called block rewards. And this is the way that most blockchains work. They reward their validators directly, and then there's an arrow down that's like, maybe users will get airdrops, maybe users will be able to tap into some, like the liquidity that's here, who knows, but the meta is not like super established. And Bera Chain actually rewards from the bottom up using proof of liquidity. So we'll talk about how specifically in a second, but rewards start with those contributing the most to the ecosystem, which is their liquidity. Liquidity providers are the first people that get rewarded in the ecosystem, and then it kind of flows upwards to developers, to protocols, and then to validators, distributed through various POL mechanics. So let's talk about what is POL, what is proof of liquidity. So proof of liquidity is a mechanism that systemically rewards liquidity with emissions from the chain. So when I say systemically rewards, I mean it's not this like speculative thing that you're wondering about. It's built into the chain. It's mechanized inside of the consensus mechanism. So it's something that happens automatically via smart contracts. It's something that happens automatically like via the chain. And when we talk about emissions from the chain, specifically we're talking about BGT, which is the governance token of Bera Chain, and we'll talk specifically what that means. So again, 99% of successful on-chain apps need liquidity. Even if you're building a gaming thing, even if you're building an AI thing, anything that uses crypto has a token element, right? There's some element of crypto economic security, whether it just be for prize pools, whether you're building some sort of game where users can stake your native token and like maybe win a prize pool, like pool together. There's some form of liquidity that you need, because let's say Esther is building a protocol and she launches Esther Coin, but Esther Coin has no liquidity, then it's worthless, right? If there's no one who's willing to help you buy and sell and trade your token, then it's worthless, right? It's like if you have this like vintage Chanel bag, but no one cares about Chanel anymore, it's like it can be worth $1 million, but if no one wants to buy it, then it's not worth $1 million. It's worth $0. So no matter what you're building, you need liquidity, because there has to be someone that thinks your token is valuable enough to give liquidity so that other people can make trades on your token. So really quick, what do I mean exactly when I say liquidity? It's a measure of how easily assets can be swapped for other assets without significantly impacting the price. So this is what I mean. So maybe raise your hand just to give me an idea, and don't be shy. If you're like not 100% sure what I mean when I say liquidity, talking about like someone has to provide liquidity for you to trade. If you're not really 100% clear on that. Okay, yeah, so everyone's super clear on that. Okay, so I won't explain it again. Okay, so an ecosystem with deep liquidity means you can trade at the best price, there's minimal slippage. Just to kind of paint an example, if there's low liquidity, let's say I'm the liquidity provider for a pool that's like USDC, or no, I don't know, Cami token and ETH. And there's 1,000 Cami token, 1,000 ETH. This is the available liquidity for someone to trade. And if, let's say, a whale like Luisa comes and she has 3,000 Cami token and she wants to cash that in for ETH, but there's only 1,000 of Cami coins, she's not going to be able to make that trade. Okay, but let's say, fine, I'll just trade most of, all of the liquidity. I'll trade it at 1,000 of my Cami coins. She'll crash the price completely because there's like the slippage will just be crazy because there's not going to be any liquidity after she does her trade. And when there's a lack of liquidity, this means there's volatile changes in price. It'll affect every time someone does a swap, the price will change. That's kind of what you see when you are doing a swap and you see the price impact little note that comes up. And if you've ever traded meme coins or shit coins, you know that sometimes you'll get a message from dexes being like, try swapping in smaller increments so that you don't affect the price so much. Okay, and just to kind of cover the last base, what do we mean when we say consensus? POL is a consensus mechanism. What exactly do we mean when we say consensus? It's the mechanism by which nodes come to an agreement about the state of the ledger. So when a transaction gets approved, it's marked as valid, and it updates the global state of the chain. That's what we mean when we say consensus. So a lot of people like kind of misunderstand consensus and think it's like, you know, I don't know, they think of proof of work, they think of proof of stake, and they have these kind of like notions about consensus, but really consensus, like if you zoom out, it's just the notion of how do you agree about the new state of the chain. And Bera Chain uses proof of liquidity. So we'll talk about exactly how that means. So users stake Bera, you have to have some minimum threshold of Bera, just like in ETH, you need 32 ETH, you stake it. Now you earn the right to be a validator, only once you've staked Bera. Now you have the right to build blocks. Now you have the right to earn the fees from when you build a block and from when you validate blocks that other people have built. And you as a delegator can get BGT delegated to you, and the more BGT that you have delegated to you, the better your rewards are when you build a block. So like, what does this mean exactly, and what does this mean for a user? So users, in order to start their journey of getting BGT and being part of POL, you have to provide liquidity. That's the like gate-kept action. You have to provide liquidity. In other ecosystems, right, you just stake your token. You buy it, you get it from some exchange, and you stake it. And the thesis of POL is like, you have to provide something that's valuable to the ecosystem, which in this case is liquidity, and put it to work. So you can only get BGT, the only way is to provide liquidity to one of the native dApps, which is the DEX, the lending protocol, perps. That's the only way. And BGT is non-transferable. You can't send it to anyone. You can't sell it to anyone. There's no way for anyone to get BGT that has not performed this action of giving liquidity to the ecosystem. What you can do with it, if you're like, okay, I have BGT, you can one-way burn it for Bera, which is the gas token, but you can't do it the other way around. You can only have BGT and go to Bera, but you can't have Bera and go to BGT. So once you've provided liquidity, you get an LP token. This proves that you've provided liquidity. And if you go stake this LP token, you start earning BGT. This is the BGT that's non-transferable. Now with this, you can delegate it to a validator based on your risk tolerance, based on your investment strategy, based on a bunch of things that we're going to look at in a second. And finally, once you've done this, you have the right to tap into the rewards mechanism of POL. And specifically what I mean is you get fees, all BGT holders, all stakers, get fees from the core dApps. So the lending protocol, perps, and DEX. Anytime any user uses it, there's a 0.1% like extra fee that's added that goes directly to BGT holders and distributed throughout all of us. That's the first thing. The second thing is you get the LP fees. So if you LP into a pool that's like Cami token to ETH, anytime someone does a trade, you're going to get a piece of the LP fees, like traditionally happens. And the BGT block rewards also go to LPs. So anytime a block gets built, there's a portion of it that are rewards in BGT, and there's a portion of it that gets distributed to all LPs, all of us. And there's this thing called validator incentives, which are optional and happen sometimes, which we'll talk about in a second. But basically what it means is that in the POL ecosystem, you as a protocol can incentivize validators to push BGT to your pool to incentivize your token in exchange for your native token or for some other token. We'll talk about that in a second. And finally, you as a BGT holder get to decide which protocols, which tokens are eligible for these emissions. So you can say, oh, I'm launching a new protocol called Cami. We have Cami token, and I'm going to go to Bera Chain governance and say, hey, I think you guys should whitelist my pool. And what whitelist my pool means is that now anytime someone does a swap, they're getting extra rewarded, right? And like this incentivizes me as an LP. Okay, if I have to choose between a whitelisted one and a non-whitelisted one, the whitelisted one gives me more rewards. I'm going to choose the whitelisted one. So you can go to governance and say, hey, I want you guys to whitelist my pool, incentivize people to LP into it. So us as BGT holders, we're the ones that look at the project and say, is this project long-term aligned? Does this make sense? Are they providing value to the ecosystem? I'll vote yes or I'll vote no. And only BGT holders can do that. So here's what I mean by LP fees. If you are trading on the DEX, you'll see this message that says additional fee of 0.10% will be added to each pool to be redirected to BGT stakers. The core dApp fees also go to BGT stakers, and block rewards get sent to BGT stakers. And these are the validator incentives that we're going to talk about just now. But before we get there, let's talk about what POL means as a protocol. If you're a protocol that's building and you're like, I want to think of, what ecosystem should I build on? What are the considerations that I should take? One thing that I always tell developers is that in POL, you can have a way to bootstrap your liquidity at a much lower cost and kind of reach escape velocity a lot faster. Because POL has a built-in way for protocols to tap into POL via these incentives, which is a marketplace for network emissions. So what happens is you say, okay, I am, Cami project, I have Cami token. I want validators to push, validators, they get BGT emissions from every block they build, right? So they have these rewards, and they can distribute them how they want to. They can say, oh, I hold, ILP Luisa token, so I want to incentivize people to go there because I have investment there. So I want to incentivize BGT. I want to give them more rewards. I want to push network emissions to them because of whatever reason, right? It might be that I have bags there. It might be that I like the team. It might be that I'm friends with them. It could be a lot of different reasons, but obviously, primarily, it'll be financial alignment. And what happens is you say, okay, I want to incentivize my pool. I'm going to offer 10 Cami tokens for 1 BGT token. And it goes into this marketplace where any validator can fill that request. So it's like an order book. You guys are all validators, and I say, hey, I'm offering 10 Cami tokens for 1 BGT. Who wants it? And you guys, based on your own thesis, on your own strategy, can say, Cami token, I think it's going to go down. I think the project is not that strong, so I'm not going to take that incentive. Someone else can say, oh, I know Cami token. I know she's really smart, and I think she's going to do something cool. I'm going to take that incentive because I think in 3 months, Cami token will be worth more than what it is now. So I'm going to take those 10 Cami tokens and give her 1 BGT. And now you guys as delegators to those validators can get a piece of those incentives. So if you're like, okay, I'm delegating to Coinbase Cloud Validator, for example, they're probably going to be a more risk-off validator, right? They're probably not going to accept ship coins. They're probably not going to accept these other things. So that's one strategy. Or you can say, I want a really risk-on validator. And so you can delegate to them and get a piece of these rewards. So again, proof of liquidity is points but better. Points are illiquid, they're speculative, they're given for performing work. BGT is redeemable, and they offer utility in their illiquid state, and they can become liquid at any point that you wish. So POL as a protocol, you bootstrap liquidity, lower the barrier to kind of like reaching escape velocity, and it kicks off this really interesting flywheel of actions that happen. So you provide liquidity, then you can earn BGT, then you earn rewards. This creates deeper liquidity. When there's more liquidity, there's more teams that want to come. There's more users that want to come. And when there's more users that come, they want to get rewards too. So they're going to provide liquidity because they want to earn BGT, and they want to earn rewards too, and they want to decide who gets. So it gets this interesting flywheel where you're actually incentivizing sticky liquidity, which is not really the case in a lot of other ecosystems. So this is the TLDR. Here's a resource if you want to kind of get the crash course on Bera Chain. I've tweeted these out before, and I can tweet it again, so it's like actually clickable. And that's it. Thank you. If you would like to reserve a shirt, just chat with me here, and we have a side event tomorrow that's listed in the events page in ETH Rio Luma, so just go there and register if you haven't already.